On today's show, Adam and I are diving into some of the games over the Thursday night. We got the Memphis Grizzlies, Charlotte Hornets, Toronto Raptors, Philadelphia 76ers. What do we even know about the Sixers team right now? Miami Heat and the Houston Rockets. We're going to be talking about those teams, and then a power ranking about the GM survey you're not going to want to miss on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome. You are Locked On to the NBA. My name is Nick Angstadt, host of the Locked On Mavericks podcast. And joining me, as always, on a Friday, let's have some fun from DNVR and the Locked On Nuggets podcast. What you got for me, Adam Mares?
Are we talking Ben Simmons today?
Oh, just all the Ben Simmons talk always. Ben Simmons, Kyrie, like there's just certain conversations I'm just done with at this point. Like, just tell me what's going to happen.
I don't even care anymore. I'm on. I am excited. I will say we talked last week. It was training camp. I was hoping for a little more news to come out. Wasn't not a very newsworthy first week. This week though, games. We got games are back. It's starting to feel like the season. This is the first week it's felt like the season is near.
Absolutely. So we're going to be diving into some of those games and just some of the big storylines around those teams right now. So the Memphis Grizzlies beat the Charlotte Hornets 128-98. The Memphis Grizzlies, they started coming out, and John Morant takes some of these games personally, I think, when he plays against another star young player in the league. I think he took the LaMelo thing kind of personally, and I love that about John Morant's game. If you discount him, if you think about, John Morant can't do this, or he just shooting and all that kind of stuff, he just comes out with a vengeance, it seems like. And there's something about him, he can just turn on another gear. And we saw it in the playoffs against the Utah Jazz. He just hits that gear and boom, all of a sudden he can just do things that you did not expect him to be able to do.
They were up 30 points at half. They were up 30 points. Unbelievable. I know it's preseason, this or that. I'm with you on John Morant. He is a gamer. He's a hooper. He's a winner. I really believe that. It's one of these cliches that we always say, this guy's a winner, whatever. But he is. I think he is a winner, that he gets his best. You get the best out of him. So tonight, interesting stat line. If you look at this, all the starters in double figures, 16 for Jaren Jackson Jr., 15 for Steven Adams, 16 for John Morant, 19 for Desmond Bane, 11 points for DeAnthony Melton. Very balanced, very good. All of those guys plus 20 or better. That sounds like a pretty promising preseason game from the Grizz.
We haven't talked about this Grizzlies team a lot, but what do we think about them? Because it seemed like they made a ton of different changes, but their team is basically still intact. I mean, it's John Morant, Dylan Brooks, right, Slow-Mo Kyle Anderson, Jaren Jackson Jr. is maybe a player to have a breakout season. We'll talk about the GM survey a little bit in the third segment. And then the big move was Jonas Valanciunas for Steven Adams. And they have Desmond Bane coming off the bench, Brandon Clark still, Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton playing a lot more now that Grayson Allen is gone. This team, did they sort of just make a bunch of moves that are just lateral, or did they actually going towards something?
I mean, there must be a method to this madness that I don't necessarily see right now, to be honest with you, Nick. But you look at it tonight, Steven Adams in 24 minutes grabbed 16 rebounds, 15 points, 16 rebounds. I mean, that's what he's there to do, is a narrowly defined role that maybe fits around the pieces around him, specifically Jaren Jackson Jr. very nicely. But I think the real reason that, if you're high on the Grizzlies, as I am, the real reason you would be optimistic about this season and a big leap is just that they've got so many guys that have already started to break out. But with the continuity and with these guys being so young, I think you could see a pretty sizable leap just from internal development from a Jaren Jackson Jr. who's healthy now, from a guy like DeAnthony Melton and Desmond Bane, from a John Morant and Brandon Clark. So they just got so many guys that you would expect to be meaningfully better than they were last year just because of that internal growth.
I see this team a lot like I look at the Mavericks, the team that I cover. You have, John Morant and Luka are kind of like, all right, that's the sure thing. We know we're getting something awesome from them. And then KP and Jaren Jackson Jr., there's some parallels there with those guys where you're like, can they stay healthy? Then when they are healthy, what can they actually be? Right. Can they fit? Are they a 4? Are they a 5? There's all kinds of different stuff with those two players. And so I'm interested. He's one of maybe the more interesting players in the Western Conference, Jaren Jackson Jr., because he was the youngest player in the draft at the time. He's been injured a lot, but he had insane potential as a shooter, as a guy that can defend the rim. And there's just not a lot of guys that can do the things that he can do. So I'm interested to see where the Memphis Grizzlies go. We're going to talk about the ceiling and the floor about the Memphis Grizzlies and some of these other teams in segment 2. But yeah, I wanted to hit on them first. But you mentioned that Steven Adams had so many rebounds. What did he finish with? 16 rebounds. He had 8 offensive rebounds, 8 defensive. And that's because the Charlotte Hornets, we'll move over to them, they've decided to just play with no centers, basically. They decided to go with PJ Washington at center. They did have Mason Plumlee out, but it seems like they're really running with this lineup of going really small. And I find that really interesting. A team like that's not the Rockets, right? The Rockets were the last team with James Harden that we saw do this. And it seems like the Hornets are kind of going that direction sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe there was just because Plumlee and those health and safety protocols, maybe that's as simple as that. That is a pretty funky starting lineup that they threw out there tonight, and kind of as a classic preseason lineup, did get absolutely demolished there on the board, 68-36. Have you ever seen a lopsided rebounding battle like that? So
yes, I cover the Dallas Mavericks. Yes, all the time rebounding battles.
This is kind of your average
lopsided. Yeah, used to that.
This is such a classic preseason game where you look at it and you go, okay, 30-point deficit at halftime for the Hornets, but what are you really trying to learn here? Nobody got hurt.
That's a key. That's a big key for preseason.
Yes.
We don't want that. Toronto versus the Philadelphia 76ers is an interesting matchup of two teams kind of going in different directions, I guess. I'm not sure what direction 76ers are going in, but let's start with the 76ers, because at some point we have to talk about this team like they are a team. That's like they have a product besides Ben Simmons. So what is this team, and how should we look at this team until Ben Simmons gets traded or comes back?
The guy I'm most interested in, if you look at them and think, okay, what's coming if Simmons is gone, like where's some of the guys? Where are you going to get production from? And not even production, that's the wrong word for the guy I'm about to say. But who's a guy that maybe makes a leap and you say, okay, we found some found money here. And I look at, obviously, you look at Maxey, who played 21 minutes tonight, went 6 of 9 from the field, had 14 points, 5 assists, only 1 turnover. He was a plus 22. That's a solid stat line for a preseason game. The other guy is my guy, B-ball Paul Reed, but he only played 8 minutes tonight. Only 7 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He's a guy, I don't know where he fits with that 76ers team, but he's a guy that I would look at and say, is he a guy that maybe is under the radar right now who could have a positive impact? We're talking about the G League MVP last year. Take that for what it's worth. But he is a guy that, analytic models really, really love him. Love his motor, love his defensive versatility, love his rebounding. So maybe there's something there.
Yeah, it's just Embiid and then Tobias Harris and then a bunch of just shooters around them, right? Like the shooters that were brought in because of Ben Simmons. We talked about those comments last week.
I brought him for Embiid too. I mean, let's not kid ourselves.
No, that's what Joel Embiid said. They brought him in just for Ben Simmons. But yeah, it's just that. And then they have Andre Drummond coming off the bench, who's just kind of trying to do his best Joel Embiid impression. It's a strange team. We'll talk about their ceiling.
Actually, I have one more breakout candidate there. I don't know how I forgot this guy. He's probably the guy that maybe can sort of provide some excitement for Philadelphia this season.
Shake it off.
Isaiah Joe. Ooh. Isaiah Joe, 15 points tonight in 22 minutes, 5 of 7, 3 of 4. Dead-eye shooter, Isaiah Joe. One of the prettiest jumpers. Rookie last year, be sophomore this year. He's a guy that I think, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a key piece for them this year.
It would actually be interesting without Simmons to see Joel Embiid just with shooting all around him, right?
Yeah,
how much space can we get around Joel Embiid? Even though he doesn't need it, like he says, but that'll be interesting. On the Toronto side of it, Pascal Siakam is going to be out until about Thanksgiving, so about a month. And I asked Sean Woodley, I was like, what should I think about this Raptors team? He's the host of Locked On Raptors. And he said OG Anunoby is asked to do a lot more creation right now. And he's actually doing really well at it. He's 8 of 14 from the field in this game, 22 points, 4 assists, 4 steals, hit 4 of his 7 threes. And he's just doing a little bit more. Like he's creating his own shot. He's creating a little bit for others. And that's pretty interesting for a guy like OG, who we kind of just, some of these guys we just write off as, oh, he's just a 3-and-D guy. But he was on a team with some really good guards and Van Vliet and Lowry on the team before. And now he's sort of getting to branch out a little bit. And that's pretty exciting.
I don't know if I buy that. I love OG Anunoby, and I love him as a glue guy, defensive 3-and-D, and also just a glue guy. And you talk about his passing, like, yeah, I like that as a third or fourth passer in a lineup or something. If you're talking about trying to okay, Siakam's out, Anunoby needs to be the new Siakam. I don't buy that one bit. And you have to understand, I love OG Anunoby. So you could try to sell me on it, Nick. I don't know if I'm going to buy it.
I'm not trying to sell. I'm just saying that he's branching out and doing some other things. And I think maybe it's not this year he's all of a sudden going to turn into this ball handling all-star. But in a couple years down the line, if he keeps doing this stuff, keeps adding this to his game, maybe he is a different player than we expect. We've seen guys add stuff to their game later in their career. So something to watch out for is OG Anunoby. And just that lineup overall, like they're sort of going weird pseudo center. They went Dragic, Van Vliet, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Precious Achua as their five. So they're playing a bunch of just like 6'5" to 6'8" guys over there in Toronto.
Really, really weird lineup. But again, it's preseason. We're missing guys. It's just weird. Interesting players over there, but I don't know that I read in anything. They were down, I think, 17 at the half as well. This is classic preseason, 20-point deficits left and right.
Gotta love it. And somehow none of the end scores matter, basically. Right. Coming up, let's talk about Miami and Houston just a little bit, and then we'll get into some big questions. And then you have to stick around for our power ranking. The weirdest answers from the GM survey. And you know that there's always weird ones, and we're going to power rank those coming up in segment 3, so stick around with us. But before we do, let me tell you about Sleeper. In 2018, the fantasy sports experts at Sleeper realized that fantasy basketball was broken. Games were being won and lost based on whose players had more scheduled games that week. One team's players had, 4 games, 3 games. Then you're looking at your players and your best guys had 2, 3 games in a week. It's just not fair. So Sleeper released a brand new way of playing fantasy basketball. It's called Game Pick, and it's only available on Sleeper. In Game Pick, owners pick a single game per week for each starter to count towards their team's total score, ensuring an even number of games gets played between opponents. This cracked the fantasy basketball code. If you play fantasy football, you know that each player only has 1 game a week. If you prefer that strategy of building out your weekly lineup instead of just the daily busy work of adding guys and this stuff and trying to pick up and add drop, you're going to love Game Picks. Download the Sleeper app, start a league with your friends today. Again, download the Sleeper app and start a league with your friends today. Sleeper. All right, Adam Mares, let's get into some more questions for these teams. So the Miami Heat and the Houston Rockets played, and the Miami Heat beat them a lot more than the final score says. This is a real young Houston Rockets team that just makes a ton of mistakes, but they're all interesting, right? This Houston Rockets team is a team that every once in a while you'll just check in on League Pass and go, oh yeah, Josh Christopher. Oh yeah, Şengün. Like he's doing some stuff. Şengün's eventually going to be this like League Pass darling that people are gonna real basketball nerds are gonna say, I love watching Şengün, right? Like I feel like that's gonna be the answer in a couple months.
You've even got Usman Garuba. So like even you get down even further, you have some guys that are kind of interesting. And then if you talk about Dante Exum, it's hilarious that he's there. Because he's another one of these guys that was super intriguing like 8 years ago as a young guy. But I don't really have a ton of thoughts here. I agree with you that they are an extremely fun team with a lot of interesting players, and they will be, for nerds like you and me, they will be a League Pass team this year because we want to see the next wave of these like one-on-one scores, of which they seem to have plenty. But yeah, there are going to be a lot of L's and probably a lot of blowout L's tonight. For sure. On the Heat side, though, the Miami Heat have a team that should go and wants to go to the finals, go back to the finals. Maybe not should, but that should want to get there, and that should be their goal. I was talking to David Ramil from Locked On Heat, and I said that the Heat were a contender for the finals and that they should expect to go there, and he said, "Why? Why are they a contender?" And he was a little bit down on people. Do you believe the Heat as an actual like real finals contender? No. I shouldn't say no. I take it back. They're fringe contenders. They're like, could they make it? Yeah, they could make it. I think they're heavy underdogs to the 2 teams at the top in Milwaukee and Brooklyn. But I think they're comfortable where this is a Pat Riley team where they like to be, where they're just below that top. Yeah, right. And so they get to play the underdog card and do that whole thing. But they're a very solid team. I definitely like them more than I like Philadelphia. We got to see a little bit of this lineup finally play together. Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Duncan Robinson, PJ Tucker, Bam Adebayo. Another one of these teams that should be able to defend really well, has shooting, has playmaking. They just have all the little parts that you want. Tyler Hero off the bench, Markieff Morris off the bench. Tyler Hero tonight, by the way, 24 points, 9 rebounds. Think about that. He was 4-7 from the three-point line. He's that guy that had the phenomenal bubble rookie season, a little bit of a setback year this last one. And then, who knows, he's maybe the biggest swing player on that roster in terms of if he's back to being good or even takes a step forward, then okay, they elevate a little bit.
Yeah, that's huge for them. And he's leading the NBA in scoring right now.
He's my pick for MVP. Like right now, if we were to do an MVP pick,
the season ended today.
Yeah, it ended.
Okay, so we saw some incredible young players play last night on Thursday night. LaMelo Ball, Ja Morant, Jalen Green for the Houston Rockets. If you had to start a franchise with one of those guys right now, LaMelo Ball, Ja Morant, Jalen Green, who are you picking?
So what's funny about this one is you have consecutive years, right? Ja Morant is further along in his development and easily the best player of the three at this very moment. And he might be the pick and because of that, it's easier to say he might be the pick. For me, though, I'm going LaMelo Ball just because I like him more.
just personally,
I like passing. I like fun. I want to have a fun team. I'm going with LaMelo Ball. But I honestly think the right answer is probably Ja Morant. And with all respect, the thing about Jalen Green, I think he's going to be a fantastic player. But anytime you get a high upside player like that, the odds of them reaching their potential are lower than people realize. Ja Morant was not a lock to become the player he is today, even though it's only been 2 seasons. He wasn't a lock to be that. He just has become that. So we know he's on track to reach his potential. We don't know that about Jalen Green just yet.
If you were some crazy Rockets homer, could you make a case for Jalen Green? Is the case like he's got incredible feel for the game. He's got the length. He has the scoring instincts. He's ready for the moment. All the quotes and stuff we saw all summer league and preseason, all that kind of stuff. I feel like he's got a little bit of an it factor, but yeah, I think that's the case if you're like a crazy Rockets fan.
Well, I don't think it's hard to make a case for any of these 3 guys, to be honest with you. I'm just pointing out that Jalen Green hasn't even taken the first step in his development. So
true.
The odds that he stumbles on that first step are higher than a guy like Ja Morant, who's already several steps into his progression. But Jalen Green, if you just look at the mold of player, I think Jalen Green maybe fits the mold most of like a finals MVP, meaning like if you you have a team that's capable of winning on a finals, 7, 8 years now, 7 years into his development, maybe he is that 30-point per game scorer who can shoot, who can drive, who can run pick and roll and get to the cup. He might be more in the mold of that. Ja Morant obviously has a 50-point game in the playoffs. So he's been a great scorer, but he's a little bit more Russell Westbrook-esque in that he's just constantly barreling and attacking. Jalen Green just a little bit more of like people are going to yell at me when I say this, a little bit more of a Kobe mold in that he's just a guy with footwork and shooting and maybe a guy 5, 6, 7 years from now that could be a 30-point per game dynamic scorer.
We talked about a couple of these teams, but let's look at what do we think the ceiling and the floor is for a couple of these teams we saw last night. Let's start with the Memphis Grizzlies. What's the ceiling and the floor for this team? Because they were in the play-in last year. They made the playoffs last year after beating the Warriors in the play-in. Is that their ceiling again this year, or is there potential for them to be,
No. I think their floor and ceiling are both higher. I'm higher on Memphis than most people are going to be. I think their floor even is higher, and that I just don't see a disaster. But I mean, injuries aside, right? Yeah, Ja Morant right. But injuries aside, I think their floor is probably what they were last year, a play-in team. I think their ceiling is, I'm going to go ahead and say it, they are hungrier than a lot of the teams that are ahead of them. Denver Nuggets, the Los Angeles Clippers even. These teams that have injuries that understand it doesn't matter if we're the 3 seed, the 4 seed, as long as we're healthy and we go through our process and this or that. That's why I think the ceiling for Memphis, let's say it, I'll say 3 seed. You've got teams like Utah and Phoenix,
in the West,
3 seed in the West. Again, young, hungry, fresh legs, haven't made it over the hump yet, really.
True.
So I think they're a team that regular season, why not surprise some of these other teams that are probably going to emphasize health over standings, whereas they will probably emphasize standings over health, being as young as they are.
Yeah, if you get a step forward from Jaren Jackson Jr., I think they're going to miss Jonas Valanciunas a little bit more, definitely, than what we've seen so far. But I think they're going to miss him a lot, because there was just times last year where they were dying for a bucket and they just dump it down to Jonas and he just makes something happen. Several times
to be clear, I'd probably pick him as a 6 or 7 seed. That's where I think they will. That's like the middle where I just think their ceiling is. I would not be surprised if they were one of those teams that just had a little bit extra oomph in the regular season. They've got a lot to prove.
The Charlotte Hornets. What do you think is their ceiling and the floor for this team? The East got a lot harder, but the Charlotte Hornets are trying to take that step. If Gordon Hayward can, they really missed Gordon Hayward in this game tonight. But if Gordon Hayward stays healthy, then can this team be the same slot as what you have Memphis as in the East?
I don't see it. I mean, the East is a little bit weaker and a more mysterious, but I just don't think they have the upside that a Memphis does. Certainly not a proven upside. So for me, their ceiling is a lot lower, maybe absolute top of their ceiling, a 6 seed. Their floor, though, is also a lot lower in that, you know, there are teams like Toronto and Chicago who I think will be much better. So they're a team that could not even be a play-in team if things don't break properly for them.
Yeah, and we saw how they played last year in the play-in, so it'd be interesting when it comes down to it and the games matter. I'm really interested to see what LaMelo Ball does, especially after that play-in last year. The Toronto Raptors, last team we'll do here. Toronto Raptors, what's the ceiling and the floor for this team? Because it's so hard to get a finger on what the Toronto Raptors are supposed to be. They should be better than last year. They dealt with so much stuff being in Tampa. They were 27-45 last year. I think this team is probably a 500 team with the talent that they have, which puts them, I don't know, it puts them like the 8th seed, the 9th seed, something like that. They should
higher
be
than that out east. I think that would put them probably at like the 6th or 7th seed. I mean, you look at it, Brooklyn and Milwaukee, Atlanta and Miami, Philadelphia. That's 5 teams that I think even is Toronto going to be better than any of those teams realistically? Probably not. So I think right below those teams, then you get into the Knicks, the Celtics, the Pacers. Okay, again, I don't know that they're going to be better than those guys, but best case ceiling, okay, I could see them in that tier. So I guess that puts them, 6th? Is that where I had as their ceiling? And then their floor, I don't think they're going to be here. I didn't think they would be this low last year at 27-45, even being in Tampa Bay. I know that was weird, so maybe I should have seen that coming. But I think their floor is probably a little bit higher than where they landed. They're probably floor around a 10 seed. But if I were picking, I'd probably pick them somewhere around 8.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I think the East is a little bit better than you're giving it credit for. I mean, you have teams like, the Hornets that hope to be better. The Bulls were 11th last year, and they made a ton of moves. They really want to be better. The Wizards made like weird lateral moves with Westbrook and all these guys that they brought in. Maybe they're better than last year. The Pacers finally get a coach and Rick Carlisle. They should be organized and maybe healthy, hopefully, this year. The East, that whole middle section of the East, we're doing a whole Odyssey season preview, and that whole middle section of the East, I gave them their whole podcast for that whole section to try and figure it out. All right, coming up, we're getting into our power rankings, the weirdest votes in the GM survey. It's great. There's some really weird ones. We're going to talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about betonline.ag. If you want to put down some money on sports, you want to bet, you want to gamble, you want to wager, you want to do all that stuff, you can do it right now. Let's see. Regular season wins for your Denver Nuggets. Over under 48.5 wins or 48 wins.
Over, baby. Come on. Over.
Over.
You got the MVP.
The Nuggets are a 50-win team for you.
They're a 50-win team. Book it.
Interesting.
I think the Nuggets have beat their Vegas line every single year of the Jokic era. I don't know how this happens. This is every year they're like, they're not going to be that good, and they are.
The Dallas Mavericks have over under 48.5, so they're a half game better than the Nuggets.
Wow, slanderous. I don't know what to say.
What you say is use the promo code LOCKEDON. You get a 50% welcome bonus. Go put some money on the over for the Denver Nuggets, and maybe I don't know. I'm under on the Mavericks, maybe 48.5. I got some concerns about them, but we'll talk about all those coming up. But use the promo code LOCKEDON, get a 50% welcome bonus to your first deposit. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. Also, I want to tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're always coming up with new flavors. On Locked On Mavs the other day, during a Built Bar read, I opened the website, which I always do every time, and the Churro Puff Bar is back. I love the Churro Puff Bar. It's a great one. And I ordered them live on the podcast because I didn't want them to go because they always go way too fast. 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, 5 grams of sugar in a bar covered in 100% chocolate. Built Bar, they're great. They're perfect for a snack on the go. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off. Again, locked, the number 15, locked15 to get 15% off at built.com. All right, Adam Mares. Friday. You know what we do on Fridays? We power rank stuff. We power rank stuff that you didn't even think was stuff. And one of those things is the weirdest votes on the GM survey. This is a survey that goes out every single year, and maybe the GMs answer it. Maybe they just throw it down to some lower level executive that gives the answers for them. But John Schulman puts this together on NBA.com and asks a whole bunch of questions. Who's the best small forward? What's the rule change you want to see in the NBA? Who's the coach with the best in-game adjustments? All that kind of stuff, and they ask that. But give me our power ranking of the weirdest votes in the GM survey.
So I tried to put these in order.
It's hard.
I tried to put these in order, but I probably screwed up the order just a little bit. There's too many of these funny ones, but there's definitely some crazy ones here. I'm going to start. I didn't even count how many I have. So this is in reverse order. We're counting up. Let me see here. I'll count them for you real quick.
Reverse order starting with an ambiguous number.
6, 7, 8, 9. Hey, what do you know? I have a 10, a top 10.
Hey, let's go. A perfect 10. Which
player is most likely to have a breakout season?
Okay.
And somebody answered Karl Anthony Towns, a 2-time All-Star.
2-time All-Star. Karl Anthony Towns having a breakout year. Like maybe a comeback year, right? But
I don't even know what a breakout year is for a guy that's an All-Star already. Like, is he going to be the MVP this year?
He had pretty good stats last year too, right?
He's good. Like, nobody's going to be like, wow, broke out from nowhere. Where did that come from?
Okay, so last 2 years he has not been an All-Star, but over the last 2 years he averaged 25.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, right? Shot almost 50, 40, 80, right? Like,
right.
Breakout.
So here's the next one, number 9. It's in the same exact space there. Most likely to have a breakout season. Coming in third, Michael Porter Jr. Last year, coming in first, Michael Porter Jr.
He's going to break out again.
What is going on here? Like every year, it's just like we're just going to keep predicting a breakout. By the way, Michael Porter did break out last year. Like he increased his scoring by double. That's called a breakout. Is he going to do that again? He's going to average 40 points a game.
Dude, that would be a breakout. You'd have to come back and apologize on the podcast for whoever voted Michael Porter Jr. if he averages 40 points a game.
Number 8.
Be all the record books would be like Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Porter Jr.
Number 8. If you were starting a franchise today, it could start any player. Who would it be? And somebody said LeBron.
I'm letting you take this one.
37 LeBron? Like whichever GM picked this one, first of all, it's probably David Griffin, but whoever picked this one probably does not think they're going to last more than a few years. They're just like, I'll take LeBron. I know that means I probably got like 1 year, but it'll be fun.
The short term, I see it as if you're starting a franchise, I need somebody to bankroll it. Okay. So we need somebody to deal with. Like, all right, you're going to be invested in this team, maybe some seed money.
First thing LeBron does, fire you as GM.
Yeah, true.
GM. They're like, well,
pick somebody he wants to draft and then leave town.
Exactly. Maybe that's what it was. It was a GM thinking like, oh, easiest job in the world.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything. I just get the guys LeBron wants, and that's it.
Perfect. Also, LeBron finished top 5 in best point guard, small forward, and power forward. So
there was 4 players that got votes on 4 different positions for best player at a position. Do you know who they are?
Did LeBron? I think he got a best center vote too. Maybe, I don't know. Luka, Giannis,
LeBron and Durant.
LeBron and KD. Okay, yeah. Nobody.
You got the Luka one because I told you, but that was the surprise one. Luka got a vote at best point guard, shooting guard, and small forward.
He's not a guard. Same with LeBron. They're point forwards. So people are like,
just because they're tall.
Yeah. I mean, here's why I know this is dumb. Jokic also runs the point for Denver, but nobody's like, he's the point guard. They're like, no, he's a center. Why is he and not exactly? That's my point. So positionless, whatever. Which one player will have the biggest impact, or which one newly acquired player will have the biggest impact? Jonas Valanciunas?
Newly acquired player.
Jonas Valanciunas is going to have the biggest impact.
Okay, no, wait. They didn't say best impact, right? It's just biggest. So this could go one of 2 ways, right? The biggest impact, least amount of spacing around Zion, I guess. Sorry, he shoots threes. I'm sorry, he takes 1 3 a game.
I don't think Big Val is going to move the needle that much. I mean, maybe. Best perimeter defender. This probably should have been number 1. Pat Bev.
Oh boy.
Well, you have Jrue Holiday, you've got Ben Simmons, you got Kawhi Leonard, you got
even Draymond
Green. You got so many perimeter defenders that are elite. Pat Bev?
Okay, so we're not saying who's a good defender. That's not the question. The question is who is the best perimeter defender.
The best. Like,
And
oh
Pat,
man, nobody gets by Pat Bev except for
whoever this is watched film of Luka just torch Patrick Beverley off the court in less than like 5 minutes and was like, that's the best perimeter defender in the NBA.
The number 5, now we're in the top 5,
small.
our real power ranking. Who is the most athletic player in the NBA? Now, there's guys like Zion Williamson who are 300 pounds, 40-inch vertical. You got Giannis, just 7 foot. Who thought a guy would move like this? And then you have 37-year-old LeBron James, still the most athletic player in the NBA. I don't understand how anybody could vote for. LeBron was the most athletic player in the NBA like 6 years ago, but in a league full of super, super athletes, I'm sorry, LeBron's not doing that anymore.
Do we have any GMs that are 37 years old? Because maybe they just look at him and be like, wow, yeah, see that there's some human strength right there.
Number 4, which rookie was the biggest steal where they were drafted? And somebody said Scotty Barnes, who was taken 4th. So by nature, the most he could have been underrated was 3 spots.
Yeah.
I just don't know. That's such a weird one to me.
That one also just seemed like everybody just voted for one guy, right? Everybody got 1 vote or 2 votes.
Yeah, there was 30 different players that got this one. Every GM, it's like, it's too soon. We have to pump.
Somebody will be up. Right though.
I'm taking my own guy. Every GM voted for their own guy, so they don't get fired.
Scotty Barnes would be a steal.
This one's a funny one. Number 3, which head coach made the best in-game adjustments? Now, prior to winning the finals, everyone said Mike Budenholzer never makes an adjustment.
No.
Ever. He never does it. He won't even change his lineups. But
Rick Carlisle was sitting around waiting for this job to come open before he left the Mavericks.
But what happens? You win one finals, and everyone's like, who's a great in-game adjustment? Mike Budenholzer. Incredible.
You know who decided to play Giannis at center?
Yeah, exactly. Number 2, you pointed this one out to me. I missed it on first pass. Best small forward. This is a league of small forwards right now. I know we had the LeBron, like, where are these guys? Are they point guards, point whatever? But you got LeBron, you've got Giannis, you got Kawhi, you've got Paul George, Luka. You could throw into that. I mean, you got so many guys that qualify at small forward. Chris Middleton, who's very good, who's very good, but he's not even the best small forward on his team.
He's not.
So a little bit of a weird. I don't know what happened.
Best, like, okay, so you're a GM or you're some scout, right, or some like executive. You sit down, you're like, all right, let me answer this GM survey. Best small forward in the NBA.
Middleton.
Chris Middleton.
I
got one. Chris Middleton. He just won the title.
He probably just didn't look at any other small forwards like I did.
But then why didn't Drew Holiday get like a best shooting guard vote, right? Because if you're just doing the championship, like the champion teams.
Now here was my number 1. This is my favorite one in the whole thing. Favorite one. Best pure shooter.
Ooh.
90% of people picked the best shooter of all time. That's like pretty unanimous. One person picked Seth Curry, and I think it was a mistake. I think somebody checked the wrong box for Curry, and that's the only reason Steph Curry didn't get the unanimous best vote. Somebody screwed this up, and it was a complete accident.
So you're saying at Thanksgiving when the Currys sit down to dinner and Seth goes, "Hey, I got 1 vote for best shooter in the NBA over you," and Steph looks back at him and goes, "Over a clerical error."
A clerical error. Maybe these were handwritten and somebody just really bad handwriting.
Are you calling for a hanging Chad on the
hanging Chad on the ballot for sure?
There's a hanging Chad on the ballot that made it Seth Curry instead of Steph Curry. There you go. The weirdest votes on the NBA GM survey. It always comes out, and it's a content gold mine. It really is.
Yeah, always is. Always a fun one. And it's always like pointless, and then everybody gets up in arms, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Chris Middleton, the best small forward
in the NBA. Chris Middleton. That's what we're all about here on Locked On NBA. Go listen to Locked On Mavs, Locked On Nuggets. We have a podcast for every single NBA team, 5 days a week. Covering.
Can I tease something?
Ooh, yes.
Friday on Locked On Nuggets, Denver Nuggets general manager Calvin Booth is joining the show. Former Maverick. Mavericks legend Calvin Booth.
Very true. Yeah. Must listen Locked On Nuggets on Friday. Go listen to that show. Subscribe to it right now. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA. Boom.